reminder that we love questions from the audience, so you can start commenting your questions now, or you can also add them as we go. I'll be right back on to welcome our guests to the show. Thanks for meeting us for coffee. Watco Logistics makes supply chains simple. Whether it's rail, road, river, ocean, or intermodal, they manage your supply chain with efficiency and care. From heavy haul trucking to e-commerce fulfillment, they tailor solutions that fit your business, no matter the size or the complexity. Watco combines smart technology with real human insight to keep your cargo moving and your operations running smoothly. You can learn more about their full suite of services at watco.com/logistics. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 53 of the Meet Me for Coffee podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I actually have not had coffee yet today, so this is problematic on this Meet Me for Coffee podcast, but I hope Lee has drank 2 cups for the both of us already this morning. I do want to remind you guys that we have some podcasts or some conferences coming up, and we will be at, let's see, JOC Inland, I believe, is the first one coming up. Actually, it might be DATCon. DATCon and JOC Inland are both happening in September. We have discount codes for both. So if you guys are interested in attending, for DATCon, coffee will save you $200. And for JOC Inland, we have Coffee Inland 25 will save you 15% off of your registration. And then thinking kind of far out here, we have a code to save you guys $150, a link to save you $150 for the Trimble Insight Conference, which is in New Orleans this November. I've never been to New Orleans. This will be my first time, so I'm actually excited about that. And then Manifest, of course, in 2026 is in February, but the sooner you purchase your tickets, the more money you save. And we have a code that saves you $200 off of that registration as well. I'm going to get all of these put in the comments of our show. If you guys listen back on Spotify or YouTube or anywhere else, you can message me on LinkedIn and I'd be happy to send you the discount codes. Or you can come back and check the comments of the live show on LinkedIn. Okay, well, without any further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest today, Mr. Lee Klaskow. Lee, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. You said again, and I have had you on the show before, but I was shocked when I looked back. I think it's been like almost 2 years, or at least a year and a half or so. So it's been a while.
It's been a while, but you'll be happy to know I still drink coffee with or without you. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
yes.
Well, that's awesome. I think we have a lot to talk about today because I know that you had just worked, you were part of publishing the kind of forecast for the next 6 to 12 months. So can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, and then also maybe about the work that you've done recently?
Sure. All interesting things I love to talk about. So my name is Lee Klaskow. I work for Bloomberg Intelligence. Bloomberg Intelligence is Bloomberg's research arm. I'm part of a large global department of over 500 analysts and strategists around the globe, and we cover everything from transportation to bonds to currencies to other industries. And again, we have colleagues that do it not only from a North America standpoint, but in Europe, Middle East, and Asia as well. I've been covering transports as an analyst for a good part of 20 years, about 14 of those years here at Bloomberg, and 6 years on the sell side, so like a Wall Street analyst, if you will. I cover pretty much all modes of transportation, so whether it's trucking, rails, marine, shipping, freight forwarders, parcel providers, anything that moves stuff. I don't really care about the movement of people too much. I do like people, but I just don't care about them in my professional career. And then I also cover about 22 large publicly traded companies like the FedExes, CSXs, and JB Hunts of the world. And all of our research is on the Bloomberg Terminal, which is a subscription-based platform. But I also sneak some stuff out on LinkedIn and on Twitter at Logistics Lee. And finally, I also host a podcast called Talking Transports. It's Bloomberg's Talking Transports, where I have executives, C-level folks, and analysts, and kind of regulatory folks on to just discuss transports. And it's available. It comes out every Tuesday morning. So hopefully you can catch a couple of those episodes once you're done listening to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking with someone the other day, and we were trying to think of all of the podcasts in the space that cover specifically like domestic transportation, trucking, rail. And so I thought of yours, of course. I think DAT has one. This one, we talk quite a bit about domestic markets. But if anyone in the comments wants to put some other shows in that they're listening to, I love to know what's out there. And obviously, Lee and I focus a lot on what's going on in the domestic freight markets. So would love to hear specifically if there's other shows out there we should be catching related to those topics. And good morning, Stephen. Thanks for being here and listening in. Um, Lee, so it was the mid-year outlooks that you guys recently published. Had they come out every 6 months, if I understand that correctly? And so this is kind of looking into primarily the next 6 months, maybe a little bit more into the future. But would you mind telling me a little bit more about what you guys have published, what the crystal ball is saying, in your guys' opinion?
Yeah, so we do update this every 6 months. We try to do it like in December to say like what's what we expect for the year ahead. Obviously, going into 2025, we wouldn't have expected or guessed anything that's transpired over the last 6 months, whether that's how disruptive and sporadic the tariffs have been, and how much that has been really creating not only uncertainty among shippers, but also kind of creating a lot of pull forward demand, and then no demand, then pull forward demand, no demand. And as many people on this podcast know, if you want to kind of operate a network, you really need to plan your resources for the demand. And if the demand's unpredictable, it's really hard to respond to that, at least so doing so in a way where you're maximizing your own profitability. So so going back 6 months, we knew that, yeah, the tariffs, there were going to be tariffs, but we didn't know that they were going to be on everybody. Our thought was mostly it was going to be focused on China. But the current administration, their policy has been, well, let's try to get new deals with everybody at the same time, which obviously can be extremely disruptive to supply chains. And that it's also that uncertainty and lack of demand. We just saw consumer confidence come out this morning for June. It was below expectations. The consumer has been pretty resilient. for a long time. But if there's cracks in the consumer, that can really weigh on economic activity as measured by GDP, which is expected to be below 2% this year. And while the risk of a recession is relatively low in the Bloomberg terminal, the probability is at 40% from a low of 20% a couple months ago. We're probably not going to that's probably not a likely outcome. But we do have to see what the inflationary impacts are on the tariffs, which we should start to feel or see in the markets in the months to come.
Yeah, so I've seen some mixed thoughts on the inflationary impact of tariffs. In the latest, I think CPI data came out not long ago and didn't show any significant increase in cost of goods or even change in consumer buying behaviors, really. And so they were saying, I kind of saw a couple economists pose the question: is there going to be less inflationary impacts of tariffs than we thought, or is it just really still too early to tell? Do you have any kind of thoughts on that, on if we're trying to call it too soon still, the impact of
Yeah, I
tariffs?
think we'll see in the months to come. That's when it'll hit, and it's definitely going to hit. It's just like, how bad is it going to hit? Is it going to add a couple tens of basis points to where we are today, or is it going to be more significant than that? I guess the good news is that the Trump administration ratcheted up tariffs to very high levels, then they brought them back down to higher levels than they were before, but not as high. And so that 90-day cool-off period between China and the U.S. ends, I believe, on July 8th. So we'll see what happens in a couple weeks if those tariffs go back up to the highs, or they get ratcheted lower if a trade deal can be reached between the two major trading partners. But if you look at the more the industrial economy as measured through the ISM index. That's been in contraction territory for 29 over the last 31 months.
Sure.
The ISM is a really good indicator for less than truckload demand. And as many people on this podcast probably are aware, less than truckload demand has not been good. It's been down by mid-single digits. The only saving grace for that industry is that it's a consolidated industry, and they have pricing power, and they're very price disciplined, which is good news. And we suspect that pricing, excluding fuel surcharges, should probably increase in the mid-single digits this year.
Hmm. Um, so let's assume then that in the next few months we see some impacts of this inflation in the data coming out. What bigger ramifications does that have aside from just inflationary cost to goods? What would that do in more of the
Right.
broad economy, and how might that impact the freight markets?
Right, like I mentioned earlier, I care about the movement of stuff, not so much people. And so if people are buying more, they're spending more of their money on food or other items, they have less money for other stuff. And so therefore, the amount of freight that could be moving could be could be hurt. So you might see a GDP, freight growth below where GDP is, and that obviously would be pretty negative. The spot market in the trucking world has shown some signs of tightening, extremely and painfully slow, and not nearly fast enough to move rates where they need to be for the trucking industry.
Mm.
Um, but if you have weaker freight demand, I mean that market is probably going to be hurt more significantly than the LTL market, because that market's been kind of feeling it for quite some time already. So it'll probably be more on the truckload and maybe parcel providers that might feel it more.
Hmm. And I'm curious. I'd kind of like an update on what's been going on in the intermodal rail side of things, or even bulk rail lately. I know that when it comes to more your standard intermodal shipments, when the truckload market is very favorable and very loose, it seems that intermodal might become potentially less attractive than over the road. But I also think that our rail lines have been operating pretty smoothly as of late. So fewer delays or congestions to have to account for there. But am I wrong on any of that, or how's the rail outlook kind of been? lately?
Yeah, so intermodal has been pretty strong this year, but it really hasn't been so strong on the domestic side. It's really been more on
Mm,
the international side, and that again is some of that pull forward demand. Intermodal volumes, I believe, are up around 5% year to date. I suspect that number will probably moderate lower in the second half because all that pull forward demand in the second half is going to create more difficult comparisons, and so that's going to weigh on intermodal demand. And intermodal demand does better when the rails are operating better. They also do better when there's higher fuel prices because
mm,
there's always a 10 to 30% discount
sure.
for intermodal relative to just trucking. But if that dollar amount isn't that great, then if you're a shipper, you might just prefer just to go on truck. 'Cause at the end of the day, trucking it provides a better service level because there's less times that the freight is touched. Um, the rails have gotten better with their network fluidity, which we measure by dwell time and velocity. I would say their dwell times have improved a lot more than their speeds have. So you are seeing incremental improvements there, which is a good thing. But again, we're seeing fuel. It's been a little volatile right now with what's going on in the Middle East, but it has been trending lower, which again isn't great. And the fact that I mentioned earlier, there's plenty of capacity in the spot market doesn't bode well for domestic intermodal right now.
Mm. You keep mentioning the spot market in truckload, and I know from the newsletter that I produce every month that we're still seeing that pretty large spread between spot and contract prices in the full truckload market. Do you have any thoughts or predictions on what might eventually be the reason that gap starts to close, or what things is it that what factors are we waiting on to see some change in momentum there?
Yeah, well, there could be some short-term volatility from the demand side. The reality is any change in rates are going to be driven on the supply side. So you have to see more people exit the market. Obviously, it's not a nice thing to root for because that's someone's livelihood that we're talking about. But we just there's just too many trucks out there, and the reality is that where rates are, a lot of truckers are just operating from a cash flow standpoint, meaning they're not necessarily making a profit. They're able to pay for their truck and maybe their insurance, but they don't really have much anything left over for themselves. And so the longer this goes on, you might see more and more truckers either park their trucks temporarily or just try to find something else to do out there.
Mm. Um, I don't know if we've thought quite this far out, but I've heard some more of the optimists would say that 2025 was going to be kind of painful by design through the new administration and everything that we're working through right now with global supply chain, but that 2026 is predicted to be a better year, that GDP should grow stronger in 2026. If there is upside to that, I'm curious if we might find ourselves in an interesting position come 2026 if we continue to attrit any more of our supply here in the full truckload
Yeah,
market.
so going into January with the Trump administration, I think a lot of people are excited because he's a Republican. He believes in reducing regulations,
Mm,
lower taxes. A lot of folks thought that that would really increase economic activity, but then they he came into office and then there was like it was tariff mania, and so you know we have consensus expectations for GDP in the Bloomberg terminal, and looking at 2025, expectations are for 1.4% growth, and then 2026, 1.6% growth. So people aren't expecting like, 2026 is going to be an awesome year. People are expecting a sub 2% GDP growth. It's nice, but it's not great. Um, you know, uh, so I don't think folks are expecting great things for next year for the economy. Now, the trucking market, could do better than the overall economy if more supply comes out of the market. But expectations are when you're looking at Wall Street estimates for earnings, them to be, for the truckload market to be up around 2% this year, following like 2 years of terrible declines, and then maybe going up, high double digits next year. So I think Wall Street expectations are that it might not be on the demand side that's going to be driving better earnings next year for the trucking industry. It'll probably be more on the rate side from a tighter market. But this market the cycle has been longer than typical cycles. And a typical cycle is like 1 to 2 years. I think we're in 3 years on this quote unquote freight recession that people like to talk about. So it'll be pretty interesting to see what actually is the catalyst. But again, we just think it's going to come from the more supply side, and that's barring any black swan event that none of us are predicting that could really like be a shock to demand.
Right. I think this will be an interesting time to look back on in a few years and analyze again. But I know that I was just talking to a friend who works at a bank, and she deals in home loans, and so interest rates are always a topic. And she said, I just wish everyone would just like forget the last 4 years and like forget what happened. Like that it wasn't normal. We shouldn't be expecting to get back to that. And so I think there's a lot about the last 5 years or so that have skewed some um, graphs and historicals and patterns and things like that we've typically depended on. So a little bit of
Yes,
uncharted waters here lately. Um,
absolutely.
I think that you mentioned when you mentioned your report, you mentioned a couple things about bulk or tanker. Those are markets I'm not super familiar with. So just curious if you have any thoughts to add for anyone who might be more involved in the dry or liquid bulk or tanker sectors of our domestic transportation spaces.
Yeah, so the tanker market's been a little crazy last couple of days, given the increased tensions and conflict between Iran and Israel, the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for about 20 to 25% of all crude oil that goes past there. Um, Iran has the ability to shut that down. It's a 6 mile ocean way where they're able to shut that down. They haven't thus far, and so people were concerned that it could really disrupt the flow of crude oil and refined products. We saw VLCC rates, which are the very large tankers. We've seen those rates increase by about 120 to 140% over the last 3 or 4 weeks. They're off of somewhat like low numbers, but still you've seen a huge shoot up. We expect those numbers to kind of normalize and come back down. But what's really driving or supporting rates, whether it's dry bulk or tanker or container liner rates, has been the fact that the Suez Canal has been more or less shut down because people are afraid of getting attacked by the Houthis in the Red Sea, and that a lot of ships will have to avoid that. They'll have to go around Africa, and that can add 10 to 15 days to a voyage, which sucks up a lot of capacity. So once that opens up, you should see rates, for all those kind of subsegments of the market to come down pretty considerably. So that's the biggest risk facing marine shipping industry right now. And obviously, other risks include, a normalization between Russia and Ukraine. Who knows if and when that's ever going to happen? That would bring certain trade patterns back to normal, because of that war. Trade patterns, to get wheat and whatever, the voyages were longer, and then therefore, again, it sucked up extra capacity. And China is really the biggest driver for dry bulk and tanker demand, just because they're such a huge importer of commodities, and then they can really drive the market. So it really, those markets will be dependent from a demand side on China's ability to kind of rev up their economy again, which is difficult with all this tariff nonsense going around.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I wrote a couple of months ago, I think, in one of my newsletters about their domestic economy and that they've been kind of struggling to right some things. within their country. So that's an interesting that you brought that up. I do want to take a second just to give a huge thank you to our show sponsor, Watco Logistics. And we've been talking a lot about domestic transportation and domestic rail as well. And Watco Logistics has a huge presence here domestically within the rail and over the road sector. And so they do a fantastic job with their customers in food and beverage, in CPG and manufacturing, even government, machinery, heavy hauls. So they have a lot of really unique solutions that I would encourage anyone to look into. And they're based out of Kansas, which is just a great state because that's where I'm based out of. So thank you so much to Watco Logistics for sponsoring the podcast. We appreciate you guys. Lee, last thing I wanted to ask you today. You mentioned that earnings are coming up here soon, and we're going to start getting some earnings releases from some of the larger providers. Is there anything in particular you are looking for, expecting to see, or what conclusions we're looking to take away from these results, whichever they may be?
Yeah, so FedEx is kind of off cycle. They're at the close today. They're reporting. Their expectations are for them to come in at the low end of their guidance, and the reason for that is really the weakness in that B2B market that is kind of related to the LTL and ISM stuff we were discussing earlier, and the fact that one of the other things that the Trump administration did, which was also something that the Biden administration kind of was interested in doing as well, is getting rid of the de minimis exemption for
Mhm.
low valued goods. So now, like, if you bought like that 3-cent T-shirt from Shein, prior they didn't have to pay any sort of duties. And now they're going to have to pay duties. So it could be more expensive. That 3-cent T-shirt might cost you $4 now. So you probably still buy it. You might get 3 wearings out of it, but but that kind of freight was really impacted, and that's was a real growth driver for the FedExes, UPSs, and the
Mhm.
DHLs of the world. Going into the regular earnings season, which kicks off with JB Hunt mid-July, I'm really interested in what are your contract rates? Like, are you
Mhm.
increasing them by low single digits, mid single digits? We have moderated our outlook on the contractual market quite considerably over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
I tend to be a half class full kind of guy, but the uncertainty created by the policies out of Washington is really making it difficult to think that the trucking industry is going to be able to get that strong rates, because in December we were thinking mid to high single digits by the end of December. That's
Sure.
how where rates can go, but like now we're maybe low to mid single digits at best.
Yeah, I actually would say then, I'm going to put this question up on the screen from Michael. He said, Lee, how do you tell the difference between a real freight rebound and just a dead cat bounce in this data noisy market? And I would have to kind of build off that and second what you just said, because shippers have been being told now for like a year and a half that, oh, like this RFP cycle, these next 6 months, your rates are going to change and things are going to get tighter. And so now I don't know that they really believe anyone when they hear that, and how does that make negotiations go? And so love all your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so if it's a dead cat bounce, I guess the best way to realize that is if you listen closely and you hear a meow. But um, no, I think any increases in demand that we see is pull forward, and it's not sustainable. We're betting on that this peak season is going to be a combination of back to school and peak. We've heard it described as more of a elongated plateau, as opposed to an up and a down, kind of like that, which could be good while it's happening, but it'll be like someone pulling out the rug when it's over. And then because of all that pull forwarding, you're going to have what people have described as air pockets of freight where you're just going to not have anything. And so there are a large number of ships that are heading to Southern California. I think I read something. I think it was like 68, which is the largest since January, when people were pulling forward freight ahead of the tariffs. So we're seeing that again to get here before that July 8th deadline. So I don't think that we'll be talking about a real recovery in demand until we get back to a place where uncertainty is cleared. Not that uncertainty ever goes away 100%, but people all know what the guardrails are. People know what the rules of the road are, and then they can
Sure.
operate and plan and invest for that environment. And I think that's what we really need to see.
I think that was very well put. I
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
that I was like love everything you just said there, because I really think that I love to think of supply chain and logistics people as being problem solvers, and we're always solution minded, and we just need to know the parameters, right? We just need to know loosely what the rules are that we're supposed to be playing by. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, is the uncertainty is just to such a degree that we're spending too much time constantly creating backup plans and all these different what ifs that we can't really just operate with any degree of certainty to move forward. So I love that take on that, on the dead cat bounces. So hopefully that was helpful, Michael. Thank you for the question. Does anybody else have any questions? We'd love to answer questions today. Okay. Well, Lee, would you please let us know if anyone was listening in would like to connect with you further, has any questions to ask you directly, or wants to get more familiar with your work? What would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm also on X at Logistics Lee. So feel free to reach out on any of those platforms. Happy to chat. Also, like I mentioned, feel free to check out my podcast at Bloomberg Talking Transports, which is available anywhere where you get your podcasts. And I always enjoy talking transports with folks. So don't be bashful.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on a second time. It was great to see you and catch up with you. And I really appreciate your insights.
My pleasure. Might have been a third time. Is it a third time?
We're
I
gonna
don't
have to go
know.
back. We're gonna have to go back and
Go to
check.
the archives. To the
It
archives.
could
Okay.
be. Yeah, we're gonna have to go scroll back through all my like Spotify episodes and see. Well, second or third time, maybe there'll be a fourth here in the next 12 months. So
Let's hope so.
always love catching up with you. And thank you so much to everyone who joined us today to listen in. We appreciate you guys for meeting us for coffee. Thanks so much for meeting us for coffee. I'm so excited to be partnered with Watco as our show sponsor. Not only was Watco founded in my home state of Kansas, but the solutions they provide are, in my honest opinion, unmatched. If you have questions about Watco, you can scan this QR code to connect, check out the link in the episode description, or you can shoot me a message on LinkedIn directly, and I'm happy to talk more. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd love if you could leave a rating on your platform of choice. We'll see you next time.